Let's start with Max Payne 3. One of the things that hit me right away was how smooth the gameplay is. The gunplay is so satisfying. That bullet time mechanic is still here, and it's just as awesome as ever. Nothing beats diving through the air in slow motion, watching bullets fly by, while you take down a group of bad guys in a ridiculously cinematic way. I've got to say, Rockstar really nailed the action sequences. You feel like you're playing through an action movie, especially with how they blend the cutscenes into the gameplay seamlessly. It keeps you hooked the entire time. The game does a great job of blending the old and new. It's still got that noir vibe in the narrative and Max's inner monologues, but with a fresh twist. And while it's different from the first two games, it feels like a natural progression for Max as a character. He's still trying to run from his past, but no matter how far he goes or how many bullets he fires, he can't escape it. And honestly, he's pretty much at rock bottom when the game starts. You can really feel the weight of everything that's happened to him. I think one of the things that surprised me was how tough it can be. It's not an easy game. You really need to think about how you approach each situation. Especially when you're low on ammo or painkillers, it makes every decision count, and every time you survive a brutal firefight, you feel like you earned it. So yeah, if you love intense action, a deep emotional story, and a character who's as flawed as they come, Max Payne 3 is absolutely worth your time. It's not just a game, it's an experience, and one you won't forget anytime soon. Next we have Lies of P. It's one of those games that takes a classic story and flips it into something totally unexpected. I mean, a dark, twisted version of Pinocchio? Who saw that coming? From the moment I started playing, I knew this wasn't going to be the fairy tale we all grew up with. Instead, it throws you into this grim, steampunk world where everything feels eerie and dangerous. The atmosphere is on point. There's this constant tension in the air, like you're never quite safe, even when you're just walking through a quiet alley. The game wears its inspirations on its sleeve, and if you've played Bloodborne or Dark Souls, you'll feel right at home here. The combat is that familiar, deliberate style, where every swing of your weapon matters, and timing is everything. But Lies of P adds its own twist, with the weapon customization system. You can mix and match blades and handles to create your own combos, which gives you a ton of freedom to experiment with different builds. It's honestly so satisfying when you find a combination that just clicks with your playstyle. The enemies are no joke. Each one feels like a real threat, and you can't just rush in and expect to button mash your way through. You've got to be patient, learn their patterns, and strike when the moment is right. And the bosses? They're some of the most intense encounters I've had in a while. Every time I thought I was getting the hang of things, a new boss would come along and completely wreck me. But in the best way. It's that feeling of frustration followed by pure joy when you finally take them down. If you're into challenging combat, Lies of P is definitely worth your time. It's one of those games that stays with you. Next we have Little Nightmares 2. From the moment you step into its eerie, twisted world, you know you're in for a wild ride. If you enjoyed the first game, this one takes everything that made Little Nightmares so great and cranks it up a notch. The atmosphere is even more disturbing, the puzzles are more challenging, and the story, while still cryptic, pulls you deeper into this unsettling nightmare realm. You play as Mono, a new character, but you're not alone. 6. The protagonist from the first game is there with you, and having that companion dynamic adds a new layer to the gameplay. It's cool how the game makes you rely on each other to get through the twisted environments. You'll need to work together to solve puzzles, escape enemies, and navigate the nightmarish world around you. It's not a co-op game, but that teamwork element feels fresh and gives you a stronger emotional connection to the characters. The world in Little Nightmares 2 is just as unsettling as you'd expect. It's full of grotesque, distorted creatures that'll send shivers down your spine. The design of the enemies is one of the game's strongest points. Each one is creepier than the last, and the way they move and interact with the environment keeps you on edge the whole time. There's a constant feeling of being hunted, which makes every encounter feel tense and nerve-wracking. What's really great about the game is how it balances those intense chase scenes with quieter, more atmospheric moments. You'll go from heart-pounding sequences where you're being chased by terrifying enemies to quieter, eerie sections where you're just trying to figure out what's going on. Next we have Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. Now, this is a game that doesn't hold back. From the moment you start, it's full throttle, no apologies. The story picks up right after the first one, and let me tell you, they dive straight into the madness. You've got B.J. Blazkowicz, still the ultimate Nazi killing machine, but now even more battle-worn and broken, both physically and mentally. And yet, he's still got that fire. He's out for blood, but there's this deeper emotional side to him in this game that really surprised me. The gunplay is pure chaos in the best way. The weapons are so satisfying, and when you dual wield two massive guns, it's like you're a one-man army mowing down everything in your path. The combat is fast, brutal, and it just feels good. Every shot has impact. And the enemies don't just drop. They explode into chunks when you hit them right. It's gloriously over the top, and I loved every second of it. Oh, and let's talk about the villains. Frau Engel, she's terrifying. She's not just some generic evil figure. She's genuinely unsettling, with this twisted obsession and cruelty that makes her a perfect antagonist. You really want to take her down, and that's what drives you forward. The way the game builds tension between you and her is brilliant, and every time she shows up, you know things are about to get wild. The characters are fantastic. Whether it's old friends from the Resistance or new allies you meet along the way, everyone's got their own personality, and it makes you care about them. Some scenes had me laughing, others had me really thinking, and a few hit me harder than I expected. Next we have Outcast: A New Beginning. The game is a reboot to the original Outcast from the late 90s, which was ahead of its time back then, and this version really brings the world of Adelpha to life in a way that feels fresh, but still respects its roots. Right from the start, you're thrown into this vibrant alien world, and it's gorgeous. The landscapes are lush, filled with all these alien creatures, strange technologies, and different biomes that make each area feel distinct. It's got that sense of wonder that you get from classic sci-fi, where everything is unfamiliar, but you can't wait to explore it. And because the world is so open, you can approach missions however you want. There's a lot of freedom here, and the game doesn't really push you in one specific direction, which makes exploration feel natural. Combat has been overhauled and feels pretty fluid, which is great because the original could feel a bit clunky. Now, it's more streamlined, and there's a lot of variety in how you can approach battles. You've got futuristic weapons, gadgets, and some tactical options that let you outthink enemies instead of just outgunning them. But it's not just about the combat. The game really rewards you for taking the time to talk to NPCs, explore, and get immersed in the world. You can easily get sidetracked by all the side quests and little mysteries sprinkled throughout the game. One thing that stands out to me is the pacing. It's not a game that rushes you. You can take your time, get to know the world, and really savor the exploration. Some might find it a bit slow at times, especially if they're looking for non-stop action. Next we have Alien Isolation. I don't think I've ever played a game that kept me on the edge of my seat like this one did. You know how some horror games throw constant jump scares at you? Not here. This one's all about that slow building tension. You're literally never safe. It captures that feeling of dread from the original Alien movie perfectly. And let me tell you, the atmosphere in this game is top tier. The space station is so incredibly detailed, like straight out of the 1970s vision of the future. It has that grimy, lived-in feel, which just adds to how isolated you feel. The lighting is phenomenal too. I remember creeping through these dimly lit corridors with shadows dancing everywhere. The vibe is so good, you just feel like you're there. And that's half the reason this game works so well. It makes you feel like you're in constant danger. I think one of the coolest things is that the xenomorph isn't the only thing you have to worry about. There's other stuff happening on the station, and it really creates this sense that the world is alive. Well, maybe not alive, but dangerous. I won't spoil anything, but let's just say, some of the other encounters are almost as tense as dealing with the alien itself. Alien Isolation isn't for everyone. If you don't like slower-paced games or being super stressed the whole time, maybe it's not your thing. But if you're someone who loves a good atmospheric challenge, and you appreciate a game that doesn't treat you like a kid, you're in for a treat. There's something incredibly satisfying about surviving an encounter with the alien, where you're just like, oh man, I actually made it through that. Honestly, the game is just a love letter to Alien fans. Next we have Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. If you've played the original, you already know how special it is. But this remake, it somehow takes that emotional journey and makes it even more impactful. The core of the game remains the same. You're controlling two brothers on a quest to save their father. But the visual and gameplay enhancements in the remake make it feel even more immersive and engaging. The puzzles and challenges you face along the way are simple, but satisfying. Most of them revolve around using the brothers' different abilities. The older brother is stronger, while the younger one is more agile. But what makes them interesting is how they force you to think about the brothers as a team. One of the standout features of Brothers is its unique control scheme, where you control both brothers simultaneously using one controller. It sounds tricky at first, but you quickly get the hang of it, and it's such a clever way to tell this story. The older brother is controlled with one thumbstick, and the younger brother with the other, which creates this sense of connection between them. You're not just watching their bond. You're physically controlling it, which makes the emotional beats hit even harder. What I love about this game is how it tells its story without using any real dialogue. Everything is conveyed through body language, facial expressions, and the way the brothers interact with the world. It's so effective, and it proves that you don't need tons of exposition to tell a deeply emotional story. You're not just playing a game, you're living through these brothers' journey. Overall, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons in its remake form is a must-play. Next we have Kingdom Come: Deliverance. It's not your typical medieval RPG, and that's exactly what makes it so special. When I first started, I was blown away by how grounded it feels. You're not some chosen one or knight in shining armor. You're just Henry, a blacksmith's son. And that's one of the best things about it. The game doesn't hold your hand, and it really throws you into this unforgiving world of Bohemia. It's gritty, realistic, and refreshingly different from other RPGs that lean into fantasy. The realism in this game is next level. There's no magic or dragons here. Everything is based on actual historical events, and the attention to detail is crazy. The armor, the weapons, the way people live. It's also authentic, and that extends to the gameplay too. The combat system, for example, is super unique. It's not just about button mashing your way through fights. It's tactical, slow-paced, and takes a lot of practice to get right. Sword fighting in particular feels so different from any other game. It's all about timing, positioning, and strategy. You really need to pay attention to how your opponent moves. What I love about Kingdom Come: Deliverance is how immersive the world is. The landscape is stunning, and the towns and villages feel alive. You walk through the streets, and people are going about their daily routines. There's a sense that life continues, whether you're there or not. The historical accuracy is something else too. The game takes place during an actual period in history. You can tell they've poured so much effort into making everything feel as true to the time as possible. Next we have Ready or Not. It's one of those tactical shooters that really makes you rethink how you approach each mission. It's not your typical run-and-gun shooter. This game demands patience, strategy, and precision. It's intense, and every decision counts. Whether you're clearing a room or deciding how to breach a door, you're in charge of a SWAT team. And you're not just there to rack up kills. You're there to resolve situations as tactically and cleanly as possible. The AI in Ready or Not is no joke either. Enemies don't just mindlessly rush you. They react to your moves. Some will surrender, some will try to ambush you, and others will flat out surprise you with how they maneuver. It makes every encounter feel unpredictable, and that's where the game really shines. You have to read the room, use your tools like flashbangs or mirror cams, and adapt to whatever's thrown at you. One thing I love about the game is how it encourages you to think like a real SWAT team leader. It's not just about rushing in and shooting the bad guys. You're constantly making calls about how to de-escalate situations, when to use force, and how to protect civilians. There's a moral weight to it, which makes it stand out from other shooters. Sometimes, you'll be in a standoff where you're yelling at suspects to drop their weapons, and it's this tense standoff that really makes your heart race. Not every situation can be solved with bullets, and the game forces you to make those tough calls. The game isn't afraid to slow things down. A lot of modern shooters are all about speed. But here, taking your time is rewarded. Use stealth when needed, and make sure you're not just barging into a death trap. Next we have The Surge. I went into it thinking, okay, another sci-fi post-apocalyptic action RPG. But it's so much more than that. The whole concept of this broken-down, futuristic factory setting is just awesome. It's gritty, industrial, and feels like everything is falling apart, which really adds to that sense of desperation as you're trying to survive. And honestly, the world building is better than I expected. You slowly uncover bits of the story as you explore, and the more you dig, the more you realize just how messed up everything is. Now, I've got to talk about the combat because that's really the star of the show here. It's tough, methodical, and every fight feels like it could be your last. But here's the twist that sets it apart. The whole targeting limbs mechanic. It's genius. You don't just hack and slash randomly. You're strategically aiming for enemy body parts. Want that awesome new arm gear? You better take it from your enemy. It makes every encounter feel like a high-stakes chess match. where you're constantly weighing the risk of going for the kill or trying to grab new loot. And the exosuit? Such a cool feature. It feels like you're wearing this clunky, powerful piece of machinery, and as you upgrade it, you can feel yourself getting stronger. But at the same time, the enemies ramp up in difficulty, so you're never too comfortable. It keeps you on your toes, for sure. Plus, the suit customization adds a ton of variety to the gameplay. So, yeah, the Surge is a gem.